Hey guys, welcome back to Global Health Talks with me. So like I mentioned last week, the first couple of videos will be focused on sexual and reproductive health issues. Last week we discussed the Reproductive Healthcare Bill of 2019. Today we discuss comprehensive sexuality education. So if you've been watching the news, there's been a lot of debate around CSE, which again is comprehensive sexuality education. And there's been a lot of pushback and what I think is a lot of misinformation from many parties. So I thought it would be good to have a conversation about it with religious leaders and doctors and community organizers and see what can be done and how it can be implemented in our country, and also just have an honest, open look at what it really is and how it can be applied in our country. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. This will be in two parts. Part one will be today and part two will be the week after today. So if you have any questions, comments, let me know. Like, share, and subscribe.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about comprehensive sexuality education, and we have a panel of 5 other people. I will let them introduce themselves, and then we'll move on to the discussion. So you can start with Maggie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maggie Moka. I am a medical doctor by training, and I am also a global health specialist, and my work focuses on sexual and reproductive health, so many research and policy engagement around sexual and reproductive health. And I'm excited to hear what all my other panelists say and for an engaging discussion. Thank you.
Hi, all. My name is Titus Kuria. I run a program called Pamoja Initiative based in Mathare. I like to help young people achieve their greatest potential through coming together, finding solutions to the most pressing issues, and trying to come up with very simple solutions that can guide them to have a good future. Thank you, Hal.
I'm Charity Muremi. I'm a student at AIU. I'm doing my master's in biblical studies, and I'm passionate about children's ministry. That's what I do. I've been working with children since I was a child, but I love working with children, and that's the responsibility I have at my church. I'm in charge of the children's ministry, so I'm very passionate in matters to do with children and educating children, because that's basically putting a foundation for their future. So yeah, that's what I do. Thank you for having me.
Hi, my name is Gashao Patrick. I am a parent, I'm a businessman, and I was invited by Cynthia so that I can chip in on what parents think about this comprehensive sexual education, and I'm happy to be here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Florence Machio. Which hat am I wearing today? I wear many hats. I'm a parent of 2 boys, 10. Gosh, if you could hear me, 10 and 7. They're very vocal. They want to start their own channel because they think they have opinions about what adults do. So I'm planning on that. Maybe it will help pay their school fees. I'm also a campaigner, campaigning for children's rights and also for women's rights. I have a bias for women and girls' rights simply because they're the most vulnerable. I am a development communication expert. I have experience in supporting national governments, supporting county governments, supporting regional governments in terms of responding to the needs of women and children. Participated in formulating policies at the regional level and at the national level that have an impact on the lives of women and children. But then my key passion, of course, is to ensure that women and children, which after they are protected, I'm sure the men will be protected, but women and children are protected from abuse. Just the reason probably why Cynthia invited me is because she had me talking about the qualitative research, since we have a researcher here, in 25 schools in Africa, in 6 African countries, where I spoke to children, mostly girls from the age of 10 to 17. And they gave me their voices. I put them in a book. I've used their voices to create change. The change you've seen in Makueni County, we have shelters. It was because of the voices of children. So I'm very keen on listening to children and responding to those needs, because as adults, we have very many biases. So thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for the introduction. You guys are very well organized. So I thought we should just start with talking about what we think comprehensive sexuality education is. So everybody, CSE is comprehensive sexuality education, not sex education, because that's a whole, that's kind of narrowing it down. So I wanted us to just talk about what we think it is and yeah, our opinions on it.
I guess I can start. So I'll start by saying I think Pastor Charity said it very well. This idea of educating children in order to build, because that's the foundation for their future. So how I see comprehensive sexuality education is that it's a series of lessons which we give to young people as they grow up in order to give them information that they need to be able to sort of to deal with the daily challenges they face every single day, in order to be able to make informed decisions about their lives, in order to be able to learn how to respect themselves, to respect other people, and to sort of, so how I see it is that CSE is sort of, it's a life skill. It's a foundation which you give to young people, because by talking to them about the topics, which I'm sure we'll expound on as we go on, by talking to them about these topics around sexuality, you are sort of, you're giving them a buffer, and you're giving them tools which they can be able to use to be able to make choices, and the right choices when the time comes, when certain situations befall them. So in short, that's what I think of CSE.
Thank you, Maggie. Anybody else?
I think I'm keen to hear what Patrick has to say, since he's representing parents. So maybe Patrick, once you've said, then I can now give my opinion.
I'm very glad that you're throwing me under the bus. First, I'm intrigued that you support ladies so much and you have sons. So nature has its way of. In any case,
I only know how to be a woman and how to be a girl. I'm sure the men know how to be men.
Yeah. But it's funny how you only got boys. Amma, you have a daughter, no? In any case, I found that intriguing. I'm a father of a daughter, and first, let me say that if I wasn't a father of a daughter, I don't know if this topic would have been a hotbed for me as it is. And I think generally my daughter is more vulnerable. She's still a very young girl, but I think rightly, as you mentioned, maybe women are a bit more vulnerable when it comes to sexual violence and things related to, in issues of sexual violence. And the way I view CSE, comprehensive sexuality education, is that it's a tool to empower both boys and girls to learn more, most importantly, about their sexuality and how their sexuality affects other people and how they are in turn affected by the sexuality, if I were to call it, of others. So my view of it is it's basically a tool. If I were to borrow Maggie's words, I would call it a life skill as well. It's a way they need to learn how to just deal with themselves. That is my view of CSE.
Thank you, Patrick. I guess Florence next. Florence is also a parent, so you can wear both hats today.
Okay, let me wear both hats. I think for me, my experience with my work and experience out there, I lean more on women and children encompass boys and girls, simply because the children are very vulnerable. No, they cannot speak up for themselves. They are manipulated by adults. They are manipulated by people who are close to them. And so for that reason, that's why I focus more on them. But my view of comprehensive sex education is simply giving children information they need to make decisions. I mean, I look at it as basic as that. We grew up, I don't know how old you guys are, but I think I'm the oldest here. But we grew up in a scenario whereby I remember a friend, I like telling stories, and I think Cynthia, you saw me, I tell stories to illustrate. We grew up in an era where, or rather our parents found it very hard to talk about certain things. I remember I had a classmate who, the first time she had periods and she went to tell the parents, her mother, actually, the mother beat her. She beat her so thoroughly and told her, don't be near boys. And she was very saved, Pastor Charity. She was very saved. So that's the only thing the mother did, and then threw pads at her. Didn't tell her how to use them, didn't tell her how to wear them. And she told us later, we are all working, and she's telling me, my goodness, this is what I went through. So we have children out there whose parents are not as bold as me to tell them certain things the way they are, and therefore they need information. And if we don't give them information, they'll go to the wrong place. So I'd rather we have comprehensive sex education, that children, I even call it age appropriate, because with each age, there are different needs. With each age, there are different questions that your children will ask. So that's my understanding. Access to information that is age appropriate for each child to be able to make the right decisions, but also if something happens, they'll be able to speak up because they've been empowered with information.
Yeah. Just to add, I think I have a mother who's a bit like you, Florence. So my mom is quite open to a degree that most parents are not. I remember when I was younger, you know how you shower. My brother and I were not that far apart. So I'm the first one to have a brother. You know how you shower kids together. And I remember my mom tells me one time I pointed at my brother and I was like, what's that in between his legs? Why is there's a doo-doo there? And my mom sat me down and explained to me, the difference between boys and girls. Boys have this, girls have this. Don't let people touch that. And I thought that was so important. And growing up, I was able to have a relationship with my mother and also my dad to where I could speak to them about certain things. And I remember when I was starting puberty around my period, my mom sat me down and explained to me how periods are, and she packed a little bag for me. It had pads and wipes and extra underwear and everything, so I was prepared. But it was so strange to me that so many girls didn't have that. I had the same experience with a lot of my classmates not being able to have that. And I had neighbors who I'd be like, oh, then let's go talk to my mom if your mom would talk to you about this. So I have a couple of friends growing up who would come to my mom to speak about periods. So I think it's also important that we create, it's true, a lot of and I would generalize and say African parents are not able to openly talk to their children about matters relating sexuality and menstruation. It reaches that point and they just freeze, a lot of them. Even parents who are doctors and nurses, people who you would think would be able to be more objective. So for me, I think it's important that there is a system in place that all children, those who have parents who can talk about it and those who don't have parents who can talk about it, are able to access it. I've interjected with my own opinion, but I'm going to throw it to Titus, and then we will move on to Pastor Charity.
Yeah, I think all of you, whatever you have said, makes a lot of sense. For me, what it means is that we need to create a level playing field for everyone, for every kid. And also, there's something that when I watched your last show, you mentioned demystifying myths. So one of our programs is called Adole Chat, which is dedicated for kids who are just, preteens, they're just class 6, 12-year-olds, where the onset of adolescence. The tagline is basically demystifying myths. Basically, there's a lot of things that are happening to these kids. It's unbelievable, the changes that they're going through. And, they think that their friends are experts. They start advising them about these things. And that's why we need to have proper, Florence said, age-appropriate information so that these kids in the next, where, like for example, where I grew up in Mathare, and most of my programs are in Mathare, you realize especially girls were not transitioning out to high school because most of them got pregnant when they were 12, 13, and 14. So the idea is to create a level playing field to provide information. So these people can go to high school, can go to university. Not saying they'll not make mistakes, but they'll have options. They will know, if I get pregnant, I have this option. Before I get pregnant, there are these options, and then you create a critical mass of young people who are educated, who are knowledgeable, and who can make proper decisions. Developed countries, that's what they do. They don't have a special magic or a special formula. That's basically what they do. So I believe in Kenya, we have the ability to do that. Some of us are trying to do it, even though there's a lot of resistance from different stakeholders who own the children, because children are owned by different stakeholders. And we are trying just to be part of that community.
Thank you. Pastor Charity.
Yeah, let's say comprehensive sexuality education, sorry. It's an effort to fill the gaps that are missing, as we've all just discussed. There isn't enough information out there for our children. And from what I have studied and what I've seen, it's an attempt to just give children information. Yeah, so that's what I would say at this point. Maybe later I would be able to give more of my thoughts on the details. Yeah, okay. I think it's an effort to educate children.
All right.
Yeah.
I think I just wanted to, so I have had experiences I wanted to share. So I'll start with, when I was a teenager, my cousin, we were both 16, and I grew up in Nairobi in a middle-class family, and it's a distant cousin, and she grew up in upcountry. And I remember going for holidays and finding her with a baby. And I was so shocked. I just thought, this is so strange. But then the even more shocking thing was that a lot of the children that I used to play with at the time, we were all around the same age, and they were all pregnant. And that trajectory that their lives took after that, for many of them, has been, by 20, they had another child. And I saw the same thing when I went to do my internship. So I did my internship in a rural town in Kenya. And I saw the same thing. I was, I think, 24, 25, and I was doing my internship. Now I'm going to my age. I'm not too old. But I remember seeing 24-year-olds coming with 5 children. And I thought, how at 24 do you have 5 children? At what point did you start delivering? And they had no options. They didn't know anything, because they went from at 14 having children and just getting married and moving on. That's the life they knew. And then I moved and started working in Nairobi, and I worked in a private hospital that is well known. And I think it was maybe my second week there. This girl came in, and she was 19. She came in with her father. And her dad said, she's been having a stomach kick. Can you check on her? So I asked the dad to leave because she's an adult, and I wanted her to speak for herself. So then I did an examination, and I thought, she feels pregnant. And I asked her, are you pregnant? She said, no, I'm not pregnant. I'm a virgin. So then I said, okay, let's just run a pregnancy test in any case, as we're doing all these other stool tests and urine tests. And it came back positive. And when I asked her, she told me that we had a whole conversation. She had a whole meltdown. It was quite shocking for her. But then what was really shocking to me was that when I asked her father, she said, no, I'm still a virgin because I had sex with a condom. So I'm still a virgin. I can't be pregnant. And I thought, this girl was a student in a university who lives in Nairobi, which is, arguably the most urban area in Kenya, and would have the most access to information. And the fact that she has this misconception, how many other children are out there, how many other girls and boys are there, not having enough information, thinking that if I have sex when I'm standing up, I won't get pregnant. If I have sex with this, I won't get pregnant. If I go and pee after sex, I won't get pregnant. And that happens a lot. And those are the people who, and now we're just talking about the people who are able to consent, not without going into, the 10 to 14 to 19-year-olds who are not able to consent, who are either coerced or are raped or defiled or put in situations where they have to give up their bodies and things like that. And I share that experience because I think that specifically from the women who I found in rural places, and also the girl I found, the biggest issue was that they didn't know. They just didn't know. There was no education. They just had no idea. And I was in preparing for this, I was looking at statistics, and they were saying that I think it was almost 70% of children go into tertiary education without having interacted with comprehensive sexual education. So the bulk of what they know is the mechanics of reproduction and HIV prevention, but that's it. Nobody tells them about contraceptives. Nobody tells them about other rights. Nobody tells them that if you get abused, you should go here. And I think that that's something that we need to really address. So looking at the current situation, we've been seeing a lot of news about teenage pregnancies. Now, we knew they were there. We have all seen, I'm sure we've all interacted with pregnant teenagers. You've seen them in the streets, at home, in shags, you've seen them in hospitals. And there's been, watching the news and, on social media, there's been so much blame thrown around. It's the parents' fault. It's the teacher's fault. It's the girl's fault at 10. It's the religious institutions. And I just wanted to get your opinions on where you think the problem is with the teenage pregnancies. Do you think it's one party to blame? Do you think it's a multiple stakeholder thing? Or where is the system broken, rather? Yeah.
So in terms of who is to blame is always a big question. From my perspective, I think everyone is to blame: government, the parents, the teachers, and society. I think because, and the stories which you're giving right now, the issue of, let's say, period shaming, which has come out, has even been in media. I think a few months ago, there was a story where a girl committed suicide allegedly because of being period shamed by the teacher. And we've also seen issues whereby girls have had, on the media as well, girls have had to, like you rightly said, sell their bodies in order to be able to access sanitary towels because of either poverty or they were too scared to ask their parents for it because their parents, it was an issue that the parents were not willing to talk about. So if I look at it in that way, I would see that it's a collective problem and it's an issue that requires collective responsibility, and we're all therefore to blame. And we're all have a role to play in making sure that we end this idea, the teenage pregnancy, the gender-based violence. And maybe just to add one thing which kept coming up as I kept hearing you all talk was this idea of how sexuality education, we throw around very ambiguous messages. And I think Florence is the one who said, and this is something which I also had growing up, is that when you get your period, you start being told, wewe ni msichana sasa, haupasi kucheza na vijana. And then you grow up, you wonder, what does that mean? Does that mean I am dirty? Does that mean now that I have my periods, I am lower than the boy? I can no longer interact with them. So there's so much of the gender stereotypes, which is a societal issue, which keep coming up over and over again. And I think I was reading some literature, some research, and there was this research done in high school students in Homa Bay, I think in Nairobi and Mombasa County, which showed that high school students, these are young boys and girls, believe that if a girl says no to sex, it means that she wants sex. This whole idea that a woman does not even have that right to refuse it. And this is both boys and girls who are believing this. And even in the Kenya, I think, demographic health survey shows that about 10% of boys and girls, 15 to 19, believe that a husband is justified to beat a woman if they ban their food or if they refuse sexual relations. And it's just to tell you that the issue is so deeply rooted in our society that there's no one stakeholder to blame. I think we're all to blame, and we all have a role to play in sort of addressing all these different misconceptions and harmful stereotypes that are ongoing.
Okay. Florence, I'd like to hear what you have to say because you also have quite some extensive experience with dealing with teenagers and teenage pregnancies.
So I'd like to only blame one person. I'm blaming the perpetrator. Reason why I'm blaming the perpetrator is because we have shifted the blame in the wrong person. And if we had concentrated our efforts on the perpetrator, we will not be having repeat offenses. Anybody who sleeps with a child below 18 has violated them. Leave the boyfriend, girlfriend stories. Those are probably 10%. The 90% that is a perpetrator. If we focus on the perpetrator, we're good to go. We only have the 10% to start talking about self-esteem, with the boys, with the girls. But we have concentrated on the wrong person, concentrated on there was recently a bishop who was saying, wache kukaa kama mtumba, uachane na vijana. I'm like, really? So why aren't we saying the boys should not? Why are we focusing? I have been violated. You're still harassing me that it's my fault that I'm the way I am. It's because I want to be a mtumba. That is why, I faced all these things. So for me, if we took time and focused on the perpetrator and called them, the ones who live in our homes, the uncles, the grandfathers, the neighbors, then we are heading somewhere. That's why I'm calling one person. I can call a system. I can also blame a system called patriarchy. Like, Maggie has already said, we have grown up to think women should never say no. And unfortunately, even when the bridal showers are happening and all that, you're told you could never say no to your husband. Oh, the Bible says your body belongs to you, became one. Therefore, when he says you agree. So you have grown up with that mentality that even a violation occurs, you will not say no because anyway the Bible says. And then it also says a stupid woman, a foolish woman brings down her own home with her own hands. Then you start imagining, okay, now my own hands, if I refuse, I'll be bringing down. Forgetting that patriarchy is perpetuated in different ways. It can be perpetuated through using religion, perpetuated through the family system. You're keeping the family honor. Your father is telling you, hell no, you'll go back. Your mother is telling you, nilivumilia kwa hivyo, please, you can do this. So all these things, and the girl is seeing, and the children, the boys are seeing, and they still do the same. So patriarchy and perpetrators. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florence. I just remembered Maggie and I are laughing because when I got married, Maggie was my bridesmaid. And one of the things I got was actually some of that advice. I grew up in a very different home. So my mother, told me, don't listen to that. But I remember specifically being told, if your husband comes home at midnight and he wants to have sex, then you just wake up and do it, even if you don't want to. And I just thought, this is so strange that you perpetuate these things and you don't give women agency. And this comes, I think, it speaks to a wider, what you're saying, a wider look at how some of these gender roles and patriarchy is enforced by religion. So I'm going to throw this question to a religious person, Pastor Charity, and how you think that the church plays into perpetuating these things and especially with teenage pregnancies. How do you think that works?
Wow. The religious person here. Wow. Well, I don't like to call myself a religious person. I have a relationship with Jesus Christ, so that's different from religion. So I would like to maybe open a Pandora's box in the sense that as Florence has shared and as Maggie has shared, all these are pointing to a sin issue in the heart of man, because because the perpetrators of these violences, the people who are engaging in immorality, it's a sin issue in the heart of man that only God can solve. basically. Because if you're talking in the context of marriage and someone is demanding, that is already, that is misinterpreting the word of God in the first place. You do not use the word of God to, the law that God gives us is the law of love. And if we all loved, we would not be perpetrating these things against each other. We would not be asking other people, like in the context of marriage, same thing. I would not be demanding something from my husband if they're not willing to give it. That is not love. So I would say it's a sin issue, and that is a whole other topic which needs to be discussed in a different forum. But yeah, that's where I would give the reason. And because of that sin, there's so much. Our society has been so sexualized. So in the sense that on TV, there's so much sex going on. Advertising is sexualized, such that even when our children are growing up, they're growing up with already their values are already damaged. Their way of thinking, they've already been conditioned to accept things that are not correct in the first place. So I would go to that direction. I would say it's a sin issue which has affected the family, it has affected the society, it has affected individuals in making their own decisions. You're not able to make morally upright decisions because we have sin in our hearts, which is drawing us towards, corruption. And that is just, it's a whole big issue. Yeah, so that's how I would say it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So Titus I'd like to ask you to share with us your story on carrying out sexual education in Mathare and how that went and what prompted you to start it, because that also has a lot to do with teenage pregnancies.
Yeah. So first of all, I just like to say that I've heard whatever you guys are saying, about the perpetrator, I think the patriarch, and also the sin, the morality, and all that. But where I grew up, like I said, a lot of girls would not transit to high school, and also not a lot of them would have like 2 or 3 kids before they get to 18. So it's very similar to what Cynthia you were saying about your cousins when you travel to shags. So the reason I started Pamoja Initiative is basically to find the simplest of solutions to the most complex issues affecting our community. And one of the programs that we came up with after doing research is about the comprehensive sex education, which we call a Dole chat. Basically, we're having a chat with young people. And what we do basically is that we walk in with our jeans and t-shirt, ragged hair and whatever. We speak in sheng if we need to communicate with them. We treat them like our younger brothers and sisters, because when we were growing up, most of us, we did not have the right role models that can guide us. We had a lot of experts who knew nothing. And for me, what I believe the biggest problem, and that's why we stepped in, is because there's a systematic way of putting people down and raising other people up. The reason I'm saying this is because we did a Dole chat for about 4 years, and we reached about 1,000 kids in Mathare. These kids, when we do our pre and post evaluation, they learn a lot. They change their attitudes toward these things. But for us to see real change, it will take another maybe 10 years when they complete higher university and all this. So we might as well do another survey after they are done. But the attitude, the way they think about their rights, how to be clean, how to keep yourself clean. Small things like, for example, how to say no, how to have healthy relationships between a boy and a girl, how to talk about sexuality. If someone came to you and told you that they are lesbian or it's a boy who likes the boy, how do you react to those kind of situations? But unfortunately, sometime last year, we were stopped doing the program by the government. So the government issued a notice to to go around to different schools, mostly non-formal schools, where they don't have programs, they don't have any kind of support, and they stopped our programs. But you realize the same government, the cabinet secretary, principal, whatever, their kids go to these big schools, the international schools. I'm also a facilitator with another program called Jump Foundation, where we do a lot of experiential education around leadership and all these topics. So I train at International School of Kenya and other schools. And when you go there, you see these programs are there. These kids are getting this kind of programs. So for me, I just think it's a systematic thing. And I believe, when we say perpetrator, when you say it's a sin, when you say it's the society's patriarch, I just feel it's the same way things are. Like, there's a private hospital, there's a public hospital that doesn't have anything. But when you go to private hospital, it has everything, but you cannot afford. Only the rich people can go there. So I feel like if young people are empowered, slums will not be there. Early pregnancies will not be there. Some people will not be very happy. So I don't want to put the church there or just say like the people who are perpetrating, because some of these people, they don't even have information that sleeping with an underage girl is a problem. They don't know. Some of them, they have been informed that if you have HIV, for example, and you sleep with a virgin, the HIV might go. So where's the alternative education? How are we demystifying these myths? So I just feel like there's a big issue around putting some communities down.
I'm a bit disturbed by saying we need to educate adults not to sleep with children. We cannot spend money educating adults not to sleep with their children. Those are people who are supposed to go to jail, and that's it. The issue of the system and what he talked about, schools not being able to conduct these lessons. I've been going to schools just as an individual. I'm in certain boards, so I can push my way out. But I know the circular went to all schools. And the reason it went to all schools is Catholic bishops petitioned and the government and said we cannot allow people to come and teach our children things we don't know. Even when you shared the curriculum, the church said no. Now, when the church said no, the government always listens, I guess. But to what expense? So when the church said no, all the programs that were going on by civil society organizations within schools, filling in the gap because the teachers cannot do everything, have all gone out of the window. The life skill lessons, teachers are now using them to do extra double maths, triple geography, whatever triple you can do. And then that life skill is not there. Number 3, you have guiding and counseling teachers who are only picked because they are soft. Wale watiche wa softy ndio watakuwa guiding and counseling. Are they equipped? No, they are not. I've gone to school. The schools I went to, the 25 schools I went to across Africa, not just Kenya, were very clear that the teachers were not equipped to handle the subject. And therefore, because they're just dealing. They don't do debriefing. When kids come to say they've been violated from home, they don't know what to do. So we've pushed for a certain policy within the Ministry of Education. I hope the church will not say no to it, because then it speaks about creating safe spaces. And by the way, Pastor Charity, usifikiri nasema tu church. I lead the worship team in my church. I love Jesus. So the thing is, if that policy goes through, then it creates our schools to be safe spaces, where then we have a curriculum that is run even by counselors, child therapists. The government can link up with child therapists, like psychologists, to be able to impact this. Why? Because while we can say it is sin, we also know that there are consequences to this sin. The consequences mean you are not going to cover up a pastor who violates. In Makueni, we spoke to about 7,500 children after they left school, April, and then when they were about to go back to school. They talked about perpetrators being teachers. They talked about perpetrators being in the family. They talked about the people who are in the neighborhood. So all those aspects we need to take care of. So for me, we will not educate an adult to know that they should not sleep with a child. That is a no-brainer. You violate a child, you go to jail. I think the only education you will get is you cannot even go to court and say, I did not know it is wrong to sleep with a child. That is not acceptable. It is just wrong, period. Hence, defilement carries a stiffer sentence than rape because it is having carnal knowledge of a minor. So the program in school was because the church pushed for it not to be there. So unless the church pushes for it to be back, I don't think the government will listen because the government does not want noise from the church. So that's where we are as a country. Sorry.
Thank you for that. Patrick has something to say.
Yes. First, I think when you asked who is to blame for these things, my what came to mind first was, I think as parents we have a bit more responsibility. We cannot all be Cynthia's moms, I agree. What I have seen is there are people who are going, I am part of a group where there's a one person, say Florence, who is not worried, where we invite a parent to speak to our children about certain aspects, especially that those are related with sex. And I have seen it to be very effective. And another way is for us, the youth, to go back to our schools. I am part of a group that goes to a school in Moranga and talks to high schoolers about sex and campus and where they should aspire to go to university, small things like those. Therefore, I think the people who are a bit more privileged, so to speak, can still go back to their villages where they came from, where their parents came from, and speak in schools. And I think teenagers tend to listen to people who they think are of their age. And because there's no good debate without controversy, first I would like to say that I am against the blanket blame of patriarchy as a reason for especially this sex-based violence. And the reason being that whenever we say patriarchy, we put, in my view, we put all men there. And the issue is that this thing is a coin, two sides. And the other side, one side is women, the other side is men. And if we say that one side is essentially evil, so to speak, and we say so, a person who does this is being perpetrated by society. Those things, we cannot just sit down and say that because a man wants sex, he should get it. And I am a man, I have never been to a class where I was told that. And so to say that patriarchy is the reason that is happening, I oppose that. I think that we should just stick to what Florence said, the perpetrator. If we know who is doing it, then we should lay blame to who is doing it. This blanket thing makes people who others would support the cause stick out of it because they think, anyway, maybe I'm part of the problem as well.
My rebuttal to that.
Can I say what patriarchy is?
Wait. My rebuttal to that.
I need to tell people to understand what patriarchy is. Patriarchy does not mean man. Patriarchy is a system. Patriarchy, it can be a system perpetuated by a woman. The people who cut girls for FGM, they do it because of the patriarchal system. But most of them are women. They are guided by the system of patriarchy. So when you say patriarchy, it does not mean women. It means both men and women and the agents of patriarchy. The agents of patriarchy could be as female as I am or as Cynthia is. So I didn't want you to go away with the wrong assumption of what patriarchy is. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. We'll take a break and then we'll be back for part 2.